Hi, good morning, everyone. Today's Tuesday, May 2nd. This is the weekly Jupyter Dev meeting. And we'll start off the meeting by looking at some of our action items from last week. I should mention that you can go to the link up in the top header section. There's a bit.ly link that will provide a list of archived meeting notes from earlier this year. And soon we should have our meeting notes that we've been storing in HackPad that should have our HackPad meeting notes in there as well. So great. Let's go down to our action items. We have one from last week from Mike. It says, if you have thoughts on user stories for configurable exports from the notebook, go ahead and ping Mike. I don't know if Mike's on the call. Let's take a peek. Mike is on the call. Mike, have you gotten the feedback that you needed there? I probably have surprised him. So feel free to circle back if you need more input from folks. All right, other action items from April, March, and February. We have a reminder to ourselves for IPyWidgets to check its minimal notebook dependency, test, and document it. So as soon as we hit IPyWidgets 7.0 beta, we're going to be concentrating a lot on testing and documentation, which is great. And that's when the team plans to check compatibility. Next, we had a goal for April, which was to resolve 50% of the Jupyter Notebook issues. It was a good, ambitious goal. I like ambitious goals. The target was about 270 open issues by the end of April. And to report on progress there, we closed a little over 100 issues in April, which was good. I went through and started with the oldest issues that hadn't been commented on for a while and pinged the originator of the issue to see if they were still experiencing the problem. So we closed about 50 issues through that method, and then Grant did a number of PRs, and we closed some things that had just been inactive for a long time, making a note on those particular issues. So we're going to keep working on that goal. I think it's a good goal to have. It's been, I think it was a good idea to go through some of the older stuff to see, what we need to prioritize in the development pipeline, and all those issues that it looked like we decided we needed to continue to work on. Those are in the backlog milestone in the notebook repo. There are other milestones there. One is the reference milestone. So many of those issues are closed in the reference milestone, but they can still be used to look up questions and decisions on certain actions. There's also a Jupyter Lab milestone. I believe those are issues that should be solved in Jupyter Lab, and I think there's one other milestone in there too. But the main one for development is the backlog milestone. And within that backlog milestone, you can actually prioritize the issues. You can drag and drop the issues in that list and put them in the order that you'd like to attack them in. So that was fun. And thanks, Grant, for the help on that, and anybody else who got pinged while I was going through those issues. So next, Jupyter Lab extension handling underwent a major change in the 0.20 release. There's the link, and they would still like others to go in and kick the tires by writing extensions, even if they're just play extensions just to test it out. And it looks like Matthias is still looking for feedback on his async problem implementation. All right. Next, we have our weekly news by organization. So if you're on the call here or if you're watching the video later, you can click on the links in these notes to see the work that the team's been doing over the last week, and how many issues they've been closing, how many PRs have been merged, etc. So it's a good set of metrics. So let's see. Of course, whenever I check the number of issues that we've been closing, it's the count's done on a rolling weekly, a monthly basis. So every day that passes, the numbers they go down. So at the end of April, it was a little over 100. When I checked yesterday, there were about 97 issues that were closed in April, and we added around 50. So at some point, we'll be able to get ahead of that. If we continue the work of closing more issues, then we're open. Next, let's see. All right, so I want to see your faces. Let's see. So back in January, I put together a team diagram, and Brian, I hope you come back for this one. Okay, good. So back in January, I put together a team diagram that basically gave a way to visualize the different teams here on the project. And I'll pull that up in a second. Maybe, Brian, if you probably weren't expecting to be talking right now, but if you wanted to describe the plan for the teams as we're working on Jupyter Lab. And at some point we'll be transitioning from the classic notebook to just purely using Jupyter Lab. It'll probably be several years that we'll be doing that, but we did want to start putting the teams together so that folks are collaborating more regularly on notebook and lab issues and questions and development. So I'm going to grab the team diagram. Brian, did you want to say anything else on that?
Sure. Thanks so much for working on the diagram and helping us put all this together, Jamie. And it's really important to us to, both from the user perspective, helping that transition from the classic notebook to Jupyter Lab, but also from the development perspective for us to not get into the situation where we're trying to fully maintain two front ends. And so there's a balance to be had of sort of transitioning development over to Jupyter Lab, but we obviously still want to support the classic notebook for a good amount of time. And because of that, the team structure that we're envisioning, or that we've been thinking about, is to have a single team for both classic notebook and Jupyter Lab. And the main reflection of that is in having a multiple team leads for that area of the project, and having those team leads be represented from sort of both sides, the classic notebook and Jupyter Lab. And recently with the steering council, we've asked Grant Nestor to join Jason Grout and I as the third team lead. Grant has done a fantastic job in working on the classic notebook and helping us get the 5.0 version out of that. And Grant has agreed, so we're really thrilled to have him joining us. And he's been working with Jamie a lot on helping us get the issues on the classic notebook under control. And I think that's one amongst many steps that we'll be doing as part of this transition. And I think we're hoping to get, as we go through those issues, get a clear sense of what types of things we'll still be doing on the classic notebooks. Obviously bug fixes, minor improvements, I think are great. And then we're trying to sort through on the bigger feature requests, which things make sense to do both in lab and classic notebook, which things make sense to only do in lab. And I suppose there could be things that only end up in the classic notebook. And so that's our vision right now for the team leads and the team structure. I think the thing to note for the broader community, both of users and our developers, is that we have another meeting, another developer meeting or team meeting on Friday mornings at 9 a.m. Pacific. And our vision is that would be for both Jupyter Lab and classic notebook development. And so Grant's going to start to join that. And if there's topics that anyone wants to discuss about the classic notebook, we encourage you to join that meeting. It tends to be more technical discussion than this meeting. in the past, it has been more focused on Jupyter Lab. Jason Grout sometimes gives us updates on IPyWidgets as it relates to lab and notebook and overlaps there. But if folks want to join that meeting to talk about more technical aspects of lab or classic notebook, that would be great. And again, that's 9 a.m. Friday mornings, same channel here on Blue Jeans.
Great, thanks, Brian. And I brought up the team diagram. I just for the sake of time, so I actually need to catch a flight. I have to leave right before 10. So I'm going to show the diagram just to give you guys a flavor for what I was working on, and then we can share it in our notes, or I can share it just with the team, and folks can provide comments. Let me go ahead and share screen. Oops. Is it sharing? Let me do it really quick. Okay. Share screen. All right, can you guys see it? Ian, I only see your face, so can you tell me if you see the diagram? Okay, thank you. So I took the data that you all submitted based on percent time that folks were working on different sub-projects within Jupyter. So those sub-projects are the large gray circles. For Jupyter Lab and Notebook, we have the larger team with Jason, Brian, and Grant as leads, and so they're in orange. And then for the folks who are working mostly full time on those sub-projects, those are in the lighter gray color. And then the white, those are folks who are working mostly part-time on those areas. And then I use thickness of the line around each of the smaller circles to indicate the number of project areas that folks were working on. So if you're on a team with somebody who has a really thick circle around their circle, it means they're working on a number of teams. So definitely give them some slack if they're getting crushed by the multiple projects that they're working on, and that's really mostly min. So be good to min. And then folks who are working on 5 to 7 project areas, those have the medium thickness in their lines. And that less than 5 is just a regular line, and nothing wrong with working on less than 5. It's great to be able to focus on something and move it through the pipeline. So and then the percentages are on, so some folks didn't list for percentages, so those aren't listed on the diagram. If these are folks that kind of will join meetings or join discussions as needed. And so that's usually Fernando, Chris sometimes, and Min, depending on which project. So we would love to automate this particular diagram in some way, so as folks change their focus across the projects. It would be great to be able to update the data and have the diagram reflect the data. So one of the things that we talked about is doing some sort of a design competition for our community, where we would put the percentages. We would basically give folks a CSV, a table, a file, and somebody could have some fun designing a way to visualize this diagram where it would be easily updatable instead of having to move little circles around all the time. So that's the idea behind it. That's where we'd like to go once we have just this static visualization down. And of course, before we share it with the community, we would love feedback from the team, so we get it right before we share it with the broader community. So feel free to ask questions. You can send me private emails if you want to. But that's one thing that we have.
How do we update those percentages?
How do you update them?
More 100% IPyWidgets right now.
Okay.
than
Yeah,
50%.
right, exactly. And that's the challenge of having a static visualization is like I have to go in and type in 100% and then take your circle off of whatever. And it'd be nice to be able to have that automated. So right now, we could reflect that in the spreadsheet. I could share that spreadsheet with folks. And you could update your percentages as needed. And then we could have the design competition be announced and share that spreadsheet with folks. And then they could come up with a design that links to the spreadsheet and update the visualization. How long do you think? Sorry, Jason, how long do you think you'll be working 100% on IPyWidgets?
And
forever.
depends on who you ask.
Okay.
I'll probably be spending the majority of my time on it until it's released.
Okay. Min, do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, there was something about the categories in the documents matching the themes a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got, and they don't, I think they don't quite match. I think if they did, they might have. I had a question about where to put some particular work on Jupyter Client and IPyKernel or something. And I do know where to put them on that team diagram, but they're those categories aren't on the Dropbox thing.
Okay.
So I don't know if we want to.
Okay, we'll have to sync those up, reconcile that a little bit better. Okay, yeah, that sounds good. All right, anyone else? Feedback? No. All right. So that's what we're working on. And of course, you can have a fuller discussion at the dev meeting about it when everybody's present. It might be actually more efficient to do that. And let me give Paul access to our notes. I just got a message. Paul's joined. Hey, Paul. And we should have access to the notes now. Cool.
Hello.
All
Thank
right.
you.
You're welcome. All righty. What is next? So the next section, I believe we do Notebook. Do we have anyone here from Notebook who wants to share what they're working on? Okay. Mike, are you ready?
Sure. I've just been working on the SciPy proceedings, so now there's a PR on the SciPy proceedings a repo that will allow people to submit notebooks as actual articles. I'm not merging it yet because right now it would just be creating a bunch of raw cells and then dumping in your RST into those raw cells. And that doesn't have much of an advantage over writing an RST document directly. So everything else that I'm trying to do is to figure out ways to improve the general editing experience while maintaining all of the functionality. I have a few ideas about how to do that, but they would take a very long time to talk about. So I'm just going to try to implement them for this project and keep the meeting on track and say that keep your eye out for new awesome things.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, next. Oh, so we have some guests. Oh, we have a lot of guests today. So we have Cameron Ferka and Charnpreet here to share some work they've been doing on the documentation.
All right, cool. Check. Can you hear us?
Oh, yeah.
Are we good? All right, cool. I'm going to share. Let me get this presentation up real quick. Yeah.
Are you guys done with classes?
Not yet. We're halfway through. Oh, like 6 more weeks. 6 more weeks, yeah.
Wow.
Alrighty. So, can you guys still see us too? Because we're looking at a big screen right now.
I can.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. So yeah, we started this documentation project 4 months,
probably like
December of last year. So this is pretty cool seeing it getting out there. So I pretty much did the design of this. Farrah helped us out putting some HTML, CSS things you'll see in the presentation, and then made the entire theme. So we're going to go through our kind of entire process through this whole thing. So one thing to note is that our docs this past April got over 2.3 million page views. So it's a big problem that had to be kind of faced head on. If there's not good docs, people will probably go like, I don't want to read these, or they'll have to get through them and not like their experience. So this was something that we really focused on, and it's going to be cool seeing the impact that we have with this new theme. You want to talk about this?
So this is what the old landing page for documentation looked like, and
that's how you find all the sources, all crammed into there. And then most of our current documentation have the read the docs theme just across the board, and they're on different sites. Let's see. You want to talk about these? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, our goals for this project starting out in December were to build a great documentation experience that was both built for desktop and mobile. Most of our users might be looking on mobile, and our current theme doesn't support that. We also had to think about the style guidelines that we have in our brand guideline book, along with all the colors that we're using in Jupyter Lab to make it all consistent across the Jupyter universe. And we wanted to make a user feel like whenever they're reading Jupyter documentation that they're in one place and they're not scattered between read the docs and Jupyter.org, kind of redirecting all over the place. So this new theme kind of brings all the documentation together, even though it is on different pages. So thinking about that, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so we redesigned kind of the navigation page to have a card template instead. And then when it went to mobile, it would reduce size layout.
And for each one of these tiles, they have the same kind of repos inside of them, and they're kind of structured the same. And as we see how people use the documentation, we're going to restructure towards what makes sense and how people can get to the docs as quickly as possible. And so as you can see that this theme looks exactly like it's on the website, and that's going to be a recurring theme that you see throughout these docs. Let's see.
so this theme is incorporating Sphinx's Alabaster. We built another theme basically on top of it, and we incorporated as templates the nav bar from the Jupyter site as well as the footer. So it looks like you're on the Jupyter site across, and you can go back to the site easily as possible. And we also incorporated a mobile sidebar. We actually built this as a custom template, and what it does, it rebuilds the talk tree each time. And if we go to
do you want to do the demo, or let's see? Okay, so that.
Yeah. So there are some important requirements. This is mainly for mobile sidebar. Inside the talk tree, we can't be using captions at all for the sidebar to work correctly in mobile. And for the index restructured text file, we need to use one talk tree. This is for each documentation repo that we're using. And it's best practice to either have no subheadings or just have subheadings, but have them on separate Sphinx templates so that once you do go to a specific section of documentation, it would go to a different section within the talk tree itself, and that would update the sidebar.
And that's mainly to give the user a sense of where they are on the page, how deep they are in the documentation. Because if you don't do this, then it's just going to look like it's on, let's say, this creating and grading assignments. If there's multiple subsections to it and they're just all on the same page, that nav bar that we created for mobile isn't going to reflect those different subsections. So if you make them into separate pages, you'll be able to find them and be reflected in that nav bar. So do you want to pull up the demo over here?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to switch over to our screen share over here, and we're going to show you how this whole kind of thing works.
Give me a second.
Yeah. Okay.
And while they get that ready, just a bit more context about those last comments about the talk tree. In some of our documentation, we had been using multiple talk trees and captions to create sort of a virtual organization in our documentation. And the main constraint with the new doc theme is that we use an actual single talk tree hierarchy to organize our documentation rather than sort of multiple talk trees with captions in a more virtual manner. And so we're putting together documentation for the actual theme with some of these guidelines that sort of basically how to use this theme effectively for Jupyter documentation. And that it's already up, but we're still working on the content for that. So.
And hey, team, one other thing. So I do need to catch a flight, leave for a flight in about 10 minutes. So for those of you who have access to the BlueJeans administrators login, if you log in, you should be able to end the recording after I drop off.
You want to just go to Carol's repo?
Yeah, that.
So Brian, that's you, Jason.
That'd be easier.
Is there someone logged in as administrator?
Okay, so is it test?
Okay, I'll go ahead and log in.
Okay, thanks, Jason.
That's one.
Yeah. /n/doc theme.
Doc theme? Like that?
Yeah.
Oh, there's an L right there.
I actually just dropped links in the side of
No.
the BlueJeans chat, so that might help as well. And the single talk tree is not a big deal. You can look at the branch on the Jupyter Hub repo called New Docs on mine, and it's actually pretty minimal change in terms of updating each individual set of documentation. So you guys have done a great job.
Yeah, just send it to me. Message, yeah. Sorry, but it's going to be ready in like 1 minute.
All right, sent it.
Right. Oh, and it's on. Let's see. Come on. Okay, let's share my screen now. It'll froze.
I think the Apple TV needs to read the book on the table.
Here we go. Okay.
It does think, but it just thinks differently.
Is everybody able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the documentation on a test for Jupyter Hub right now. So let's see. This has subsections. So
Cameron?
this is like yeah.
At the bottom right-hand corner, pick up New Docs instead.
Yeah, right there.
Right here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
New Docs, that's the link.
It's at the very top there.
There we go.
Cool.
There we
The
go.
other were just iterations of the same.
Okay, cool. So you can see each one of these subsections has its own page. So we're hoping that if you have enough content for your subsections that you split it into each page. If not, you can ID it on the main page for like Jupyter Hub user guide. So let's say we're in this Jupyter Hub user guide section. Let's go to mobile and see what this experience looks like. So it's a completely different experience, while it's looking pretty similar. So you can see we just collapse each one of these items in the table of contents to only show when the user actually wants to start navigating to that section of the website. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. We try to make it pretty basic, but really readable. And we're going to continue to iterate this week on style changes and bug fixes. And hopefully we get this theme out to all the repos in the next week or two, because I think it'd be sweet for the community.
And one thing that, Cameron, if you can show that documentation again, if it's easy, one thing to emphasize is that all of our docs can still be hosted as separate projects on Read the Docs. What we've done is incorporate the site header of the Jupyter website into the docs theme itself. And so from a user's perspective, they think they're on one website, going back and forth between documentation, about, install, NB Viewer, but in actuality, they're visiting multiple different websites that we've integrated under that one header. And so that's sort of how we're balancing the need to have separate doc development and hosting for each repo or subproject, but integration with the website. And we would like to also offer this unified site header for some of our other websites like NB Viewer, the blog, etc. And that solves some of the usability issues that we've found where people leave our website and can't get back. So.
Cool. Yeah, so before we end this off, does anybody have any questions or anything before we end up? All right, then it looks like we're good for the next.
All right, thanks guys. That was beautiful. So I'm gonna have to hand the baton over to someone else. Brian, would you be interested in continuing?
Yeah.
Meeting? Okay, great. Super. So let me just, services is the next one. And that's Pete and Min usually. And I'm going to drop off. So see you guys.
Safe travels, Jamie.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, so Pete or Min on services.
I had a couple notes, unless Min's got more, but just some Docker Stacks backlog grooming. There were quite a few issues open, a lot of them questions. Went through, closed out ones that were idle, which cleaned it up quite a bit. There's a handful of enhancement requests against the stacks there, and we had a new contributor, Naveen, who's been helping out and just picking those off, so that's been great. I think, Min, you redeployed the NB Viewer site in the past week, which had the MathJax CDN fix. I believe that was the main reason. So that's up and running, and MathJax is still working, or at least no one has said it isn't, so that's good. And there's a couple of PRs open against NB Viewer itself, one for adding a show hide code capability that Mike and I have gone back and forth a little bit on, and one from the community about supporting iframes in notebooks on the NB Viewer site, which is hitting a test failure, but I think it's something to do with the routes. I'll work with the person on that. And I think the other service, like a couple weeks ago I was here, I said we were starting to move towards the Chrome Gateway 2.0 release. Still need to get back on doing that. Roland Weber, who believes that IBM has actually been helping out with pull requests on that repo, so it's also good to have more hands on deck. If you're on mute, Brian.
Yeah, really.
Have we transitioned NB Viewer to use the CSS from Notebook 5.0 yet?
No.
Okay.
It's on 4.2, 4.1, I believe. We should.
Yeah, we can do that. I think so. NB Viewer is getting it from NB Convert. I think. I don't remember if it gets it directly from Notebook, but it might require a release of NB Convert. But both of those should definitely be updated now that there's a release.
Okay, great. All right, anything else on services?
Just related to the NB Viewer deploy, I made some note somewhere that I should probably go through with whoever's interested the process of deploying and upgrading things like NB Viewer to make sure that people other than me can do it. And so we can try to arrange a time with anybody interested so that I can walk through some other people to just go through it and make sure that there are permissions and everything needed for that.
Happy to help with that, and
what all would that consist of?
Mainly just sitting down and so we've got these repos like NB Viewer deploy and things, and allegedly they have everything you need to just go through and do it. And so the main thing would be to sit down with that and me on the line and have somebody else go through and just do it, and then we can fill in all the blanks that I'm sure are actually there.
Thereby
In
creating
particular,
a
I
line
think there's
virus
probably
competency.
Yep. And I suspect that one important piece that's missing is that when we set up new servers and things on Rackspace, is they get a default set of SSH keys that I don't remember whose keys are on that, but we should probably update that to have a larger group of people. It's possible it's just like me and Kyle and Matthias and Thomas. I'll need to check.
I'd gladly help out with that. The next couple of weeks might be a little tough for me, but after that, I'm definitely on board.
Me too. Maybe at the dev meeting would be the best time.
That sounds delightful.
Great. All right, so next would be dashboard and related extensions, and there's a note here from Pete saying C governance. Should we wait to talk about that when we get to the governance section then?
I can just mention it now. There's a PR open clarifying the new sub-projects document and the governance. I, just before the meeting, added all the steering council as reviewers because I think we needed 2/3 approval. And I addressed your feedback, Brian, I think a couple days ago. So that's all.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much for that PR, and it's definitely needed. Next is Jupyter Lab. Steve, Darian, Chris thinks
here.
Go for it.
All right, so we're pushing hard to get a beta release out, hopefully by before the dev meeting at the end of this month. Last remaining things are getting the extension mechanism handling sorted out, and then we'd like to get some major API changes through before people start building extensions in earnest against the beta release. Ian's got some exciting work going on with the real-time collaboration. We've got most of the pieces needed for that and he's already built a chat box using that so you have a real-time chat associated with the current document we're working on. And I saw right before the meeting, it looks like he snuck in the ability to drag one of those items into the notebook as a markdown cell. It's pretty nice. And Brian, did you want to talk about your collapsing?
Yeah, I think this is a good sort of cross-project question. So we're currently working on some of the UI UX around the notebook and cells, making small visual design and user experience improvements to that. And one of the things we're doing along with that is designing the UI for both cell selection and input and output hiding and collapsing. And our initial, the way we're picturing it in Jupyter Lab is that state of input and output being hidden or shown would be view information that would not by default be persisted to the document or the real-time collaboration, but then there would be some sort of command a user could run to say, persist my collapse state to NB convert metadata, and or persist it to the document. And so a couple points of collaboration with the NB convert team, the NB viewer folks. One is making sure that when we do persist it, that we're persisting it in a way that makes sense from the metadata and document format perspective. The second is to work with anyone on the NB viewer side to basically build a unified UI for doing this collapsing and expanding stuff, so we don't have to repeat the visual and UX design of that stuff.
Where are you planning on having the UI for that? Because in NB Viewer, often you don't have anything like a toolbar. You don't have anything like the ability to select things and then apply stuff. So hiding and collapsing is going to have to take a slightly different form if you're relying on that.
Yeah. So in the latest mockups we have, the current cell indicator. So right now, the active cell has two things. It has a border and then a left border that shows which cell is selected. And we're basically thinking about some sort of cell indicator. Cameron's showing a couple screenshots here that indicate both cell selection and have a clickable UI for collapsing. And we're still working on sort of what it looks like, but the idea is that there would be a clickable div on the left side of a cell and, well, on the left side of an input and an output that could do the collapsing action. And in the live notebook, that UI would probably be only shown on the selected cell. In NB Convert, we could show it on hover, we could show it on all cells. Like there's flexibility, but from a conceptual perspective, basically divs on the left side of input and output that can be clicked to collapse and expand.
That's pretty similar to what I put out there with the hiding cells stuff.
Okay, so yeah.
Happy to link to that if you want.
Two comments. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
One comment is maybe it'd be better to, instead of take up more horizontal space, where in Jupyter Lab, if you have two notebooks side by side, that horizontal space becomes pretty precious, to make that collapsing UI part of the label for the cell. So I can imagine you have the bracket 1, and then right underneath it, you click on the 1 or something, and and the line is going directly underneath the 1 instead of taking another vertical column there.
So the key thing the other thing we're trying to do is to use this UI to indicate what cell is selected. In particular, we're trying to get rid of the border around the cell.
Okay.
And so we do need some sort of UI to indicate the selected cell. And I totally agree. We don't want like a separate UI showing which cell is selected and another UI that shows collapsing and hiding. So we're trying to combine those two into one. And the way to think about it is this UI would replace the blue left border of the selected cell.
Okay. Anyway, just a thought. Selvin had something too.
Yeah, it's really similar to the current output getter that we use to move outputs to other tabs. Do you think that there is a risk that people mistake one for the other?
So the other thing that we're working on and thinking about is rethinking. So a Jupyter Lab right now in master allows individual outputs, and I don't mean the entire output area of the cell, but for example, if you print 10 integers in Jupyter Lab, you can drag one of those integers out into the doc panel. Now, if you have one output and it's a visualization or something like that, that's useful, but in many other cases, it's overkill to allow individual outputs. And so what we're envisioning is transitioning to a model where the entity that you could drag out of a notebook into the doc panel as a whole would be an entire cell. And then once you have input and output collapsing, if you want to focus on just the output dragged out, you just collapse the input and can work with it that way. And so we're trying to unify all this. It's by no means decided. Right now we're refactoring the code so we can start to actually try some of these things. But that's our current thinking about how this would interact with sort of draggable content moving into the doc panel.
So one of my reactions to the quick prototype, which looks pretty cool, is that it might be nice to have a slightly different kind of UI to indicate on hover that you've already collapsed something than just the inverted arrow that you would use to collapse it, because that can be easily misread, and it might be hard to track down lost cells, and especially if cells have no borders anymore.
Yeah, so I should mention the other, I don't know if you saw, there will be some UI, some visual indicator where the output or input would have been to show that there's an input or output that's being hidden. Like the classic way of doing that would be like triple dots or something.
Okay.
Yeah, well, there's one example of what that might look like.
In line with the rest. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, you can't entirely get rid of the input or the output. Otherwise, there's nothing to click on, and the user doesn't know there's something there.
Oh, I know. I mean, the way that I had solved it was keeping an element off to the side, and it was either toggled on or off. But one possibility would be, rather than having it inline, would be to have it just below, if so long as you have the anything of the cell there, like the cell, the prompt number or whatever, is to have triple dots right below that in that left column, as opposed to having it in line with the rest, because now it looks like 3 quotes are the output of that cell. Or 3 dots, sorry.
Yeah, and we'll definitely need to iterate on these things.
Sure. Loop me in when you're. I hadn't seen that these things were happening, and if it would be helpful, I'm happy to pitch in.
That's exactly why we brought it up here, because we know that other people are working on other aspects of this, and yeah, so we'll definitely loop you in. Fantastic. We should move on to other stuff. Anything else on Jupyter Lab?
I'm looking at Microsoft Surface Laptop. It's so long.
Oh, that's it.
Okay. IPyWidgets. Looks like Sylvan and Jason are here.
Yeah. And so we released an alpha, put instructions in the paper, Dropbox paper notes. We had some new contributions, a new password widget, a new repeat button on the play widget. We now serialize binary widget state so that you can save the widget. Since we added the capability for widgets to have binary state, we needed to upgrade the serialization for saving widget state to a notebook, etc. So we added that, and we've refactored responsibilities so that widget managers are now in charge of loading the appropriate widget classes, which just cleans up the API a little bit and makes the responsibilities a lot clearer. And so we think we're about done with the major features that we're planning on doing, and we're shifting focus towards testing and documentation. There might be some more refactoring in the repo that we'll do, but the major focus now is testing and documentation.
Yeah.
That's it. Back to you, Brian.
All right. So next up is Jupyter Hub.
How about I'm going to do one more quick shout out. Thank you to the Cal Poly interns, Charnpreet, Cameron, and Faraka for the great work they're doing on the docs, and also making our presentations look beautiful and making the user experience awesome. So congrats, guys and gals, and thank you again. And as far as Jupyter Hub, we're missing Min and his clones, but we have been pretty much doing triage and support configuration questions, answering and stuff on Jupyter Hub, and not a whole lot of new development going on currently, but there is some really great work being done on the Kubernetes deployment stuff, and some really good feedback from community members that are using the docs, and we thank them for that. And that's about it for Jupyter Hub right now, unless Min has something.
I've been dealing with grant review mostly, so I haven't done a whole lot in the last week or two.
We miss you.
Me too.
All right. Anyone want to mention anything about IPython?
I put one little thing in there. I finally got around to something we've been talking about for a very long time, of implementing a method. So we've got our repr HTML and whatnot, and now that everybody's talking about custom MIME types, we need a way for people to say, I can be displayed with this MIME type. So I put up a proposal of one such implementation that is just another method, but that instead of returning one MIME type, it returns the MIME bundle itself. So it'll support arbitrary MIME types.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Min. That will be very helpful for a lot of people. And looks like the next section that has content is the conferences and outreach category. And I did want to mention, so there's a bunch of different Jupyter-related events that are listed in our page here. Obviously, PyCon is coming up in Portland soon. PlotCon is in the Bay Area this week. And yeah, there's a lot of other conferences there. Probably most important is JupyterCon. And as hopefully everyone knows, and if not, JupyterCon, our first conference, is going to be this summer in New York City, August 22nd to 25th. And registration is now live. The talks we had submitted for the conference were absolutely spectacular. We got over 200 submissions, and we've picked, I guess, 48 of those for the program. And there was easily another, honestly, there was probably another 100 talks that were essentially indistinguishable from the quality perspective. And it was really hard to make the final decisions, but we're just thrilled with the talks that are going to be given at JupyterCon. And so I also wanted to mention that there's O'Reilly, with whom we're partnering for JupyterCon, has diversity scholarships, and that covers both registration and a good portion of travel expenses. And then in conjunction with our funding agencies at Cal Poly and Berkeley, we're also offering student scholarships as well. The details of the diversity scholarship are on the JupyterCon registration page, and we're hoping to have the student scholarships up soon. And so I encourage everyone to check that out. And if you have questions about JupyterCon, feel free to post on the Jupyter Google group, and then Fernando and I or other people can handle those. And next category is governance. And I guess, Pete, you already mentioned the PR that you had there. The only other comment I have on governance is that I have it on my to-do list. There's a number of PRs that I've either started or participated on the governance repo that I can help shepherd through the process of being edited, approved, and merged. Next is releases last week. Looks like, Jason, you all got IPyWidgets 7.0 alpha out the door. Is that correct?
Yep.
And I guess we also got JupyterLab 0.20 out the door last week. And does anyone know of any releases coming up on sub-projects for this week? All right. There's another section there for soon to be released. Looks like NBDime 0.3, JupyterLab 0.21. And if there's any other releases coming up, if folks can add those. And at this point, we have reached the end of our agenda, only 4 minutes over. Is there any other topics that folks wanted to bring up before we close the meeting out? All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us. And bye-bye, Internet. Jason, were you able to log on and can stop the recording?